Okay. All right, then I'm going to call this meeting of the Student Senate to order at 5:04 p.m. We'll start off just going through our agenda. Some revisions to the agenda. I'm proposing that we change the AI workgroup report to make that a discussion item, and that we give the food security referendum an extra 5 minutes, so it's a 15-minute item instead of a 20-minute, or instead of a 10-minute item. Is there any opposition to that change to the agenda?
Do you think we should
Oh,
motion to move that down and wait till, like, just in case? Because I want Lola to be here, and she said she was going to be able to.
oh, yeah, that would be addressed by the AI, moving the AI workgroup to discussion, because that
Oh,
would
okay.
come before yet. Lola had reached out to me about moving it back, but if we move the workgroup report forward, that will in effect be the same thing. Yeah.
Sorry, just to be clear, you said give it an extra 10 minutes for the action item?
I said 5, but I'm
Oh, 5, okay.
fine with 10. And honestly, we have a lot of time. We could do 10. Lola just asked for 15 to 20. I'm not going to be too stringent on it. Yeah. Okay, then are there any other revisions to the agenda people want to propose? I'm gonna bring us all on screen also, so that, you know, the 0 people watching can actually see the people in the Senate, and we know who's talking. Oh yeah, by the way, if you are off screen, you can still be heard. Just as a fun fact. Anyway, we'll move forward with that. So the agenda is now going to be AI workgroup report, food security referendum, and then just our Senate reports. I guess we'll do the consent items also, but that's what we're going to move forward with. All right. Next thing we've got is the consent items. We've got the minutes from last meeting. Hopefully you guys have all had a chance to review those. Are there any comments on those? If not, I would welcome a motion to approve them. Oh yeah, Lauren, go ahead.
I noticed that I was listed as being present in that meeting, but also listed as being absent. So maybe it's just a minor edit, but I wasn't at the last meeting, so we could take that out.
Okay. Yeah, we can make sure that that's updated. Any other edits? Okay, with there being no other edits, I'd welcome a motion to approve the consent items with the stated amendment. Anyone wants to make that motion or a similar motion?
Durbin motions
motions.
Oh. Durbin motions to approve April 17th minutes with the proper attendance for Lauren.
Okay, is there a second on
10
that?
seconds.
Okay, moved by Durbin, seconded by Din. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, with no discussion, all those in favor, just use the chat. Type yay out if you're in favor, type nay out if you're opposed, and if you want to abstain, just type abstain in the chat. Okay, it looks like that motion passes unanimously from what I can tell. I don't want to count those. I'm assuming it's something 0-0. All right, moving on. Those minutes are approved. Public forum. I'll check the Q&A. It doesn't look like there's anyone here. There's also no questions that have been asked yet. Is there anyone in the Senate that wants to bring something up in public forum? No, okay. We'll move on to info items guests, which we don't have any. So we'll go to action items guests, which we don't have any of either. And we also don't have any info items Senate. So we'll move on to discussion items. And that'll be the AI work group report. So I'll have John walk us through that.
Okay, so for the past week, me and several members of the Senate have been working on forming a resolution to put out in opposition to the proposed AI detection software from campus. And for this meeting, we thought we would give you guys a rundown of what we've been working on, as well as asking a couple of questions to help us form our resolution. So just wait a sec while we get the document pulled up. But
Yeah, Nelly, can you get the... Yeah.
okay, so for a bit of context, ASWWU released guidelines for the academic uses of AI for students. The website defines AI terms and helps provide guidance for their use. And previously, Western had an AI detection software that was offered through a free trial status by Turnitin, which is their plagiarism detection software, which expired December 31st. And since then, there's been calls from some faculty from CHSS and other colleges for a renewed AI detection software that would be purchased by the school. And ASWWU's preferred option would be Turnitin, which claims a 1% false positive for any papers with more than 20% AI use, a sentence false positive rate of 4%. And by ASWWU's own research, which they've not published, these numbers seem exaggerated to make Turnitin look better. Other context is that UW has recently rejected an AI detection software for their own campus over concerns of false positives. And on January 10th, CHSS faculty released a statement regarding their concern over academic dishonesty with AI and calling for an AI detection software. So with that, the Faculty Senate tasked ATC, which is the Academic Technology Committee, with coming up with voting on the feasibility of an AI detection software. And they're going to vote on it the first Monday of May, which is the 6th. But some other context for that is the university last year, all departments were asked to cut 3% across their divisions. And there's projected to be a $10 million budget shortfall for the coming year. So as part of our resolution, we're arguing on several points about whether or not, given the current climate of budget cutting at Western, an AI detection software would be the best use of the university's funds. And so, but right now, I have a handful of questions that would be helpful for us to kind of see what your guys' opinion on this would be. So the first question is, should this resolution provide alternatives to professors to create assignments that prevent or discourage students from using AI to cheat? And I'm going to copy and paste these questions into the chat. So this is the first question. welcome any thoughts on this. But
Yeah, I
For
think
clarification, oh, sorry.
yeah, I think this question is sort of about just in our resolution, should we give like examples of like, oh, professors, instead of making this assignment that you can easily cheat on with AI, maybe you should do this instead. Yeah, Daisy, did you want to say something?
No, yeah, that's just what I was confirming because I couldn't tell if the alternatives meant other software. But yeah, I like that idea being in the resolution.
Yeah. Any other senators have thoughts on that idea? If you want to. Okay, so Lauren asked, do you guys have ideas of alternatives so far? Yeah, you can take that, John.
okay, yeah. So we discussed that a bit, and James, I know when we were talking about it, you had a couple of ideas for how professors could change their pedagogy, and like speaking from personal experience, like I know we had a couple of good examples. Like,
Sure. So the main area of concern is, again, from the CHSS professors. And so a lot of the assignments, especially in the lower division classes, they are online short essays, which would be harder for AI to detect, like any AI detection software to detect AI usage because they are shorter. And the alternatives that we would suggest for professors would include in-person essays or alternatives that aren't short essays that students do online.
yeah, exactly like that. I think a lot of what we were thinking of putting in this proposal is trying to encourage professors to like create assignments that it would be difficult and in general discourage students from trying to use AI to write their essays. It's like, I don't know, part of our approach is that if you're thinking if we put out a statement that's, expressing that the AS is against an AI detection software, it would be in good faith to provide, an alternative to the status quo, which is no AI detection software, which will hopefully address the concerns of CHSS faculty. I see a couple of people typing in chat, so.
Yeah, I'll sort of add some thoughts to that. I think that there's some, and I guess maybe this isn't germane to the topic, but I think it is challenging to figure out a solution that works for the like 100 and 200 level classes, because the sort of level of work that's expected there is not so high such that AI is, or at least our current iterations of generative AI aren't able to handle it. I think sort of what John and James had raised about short answers, those ones are not professor can't have you check in at a bunch of different times with your short answer to make sure that you're doing it yourself. That's 4 sentences. So yeah, I think that's challenging. Lauren said that she agrees that it would be helpful to list alternatives for professors in the resolution.
Okay. And sort of the opposite of that, we were wondering if if any senators had opposition to the idea of suggesting to faculty that they could change their classroom pedagogy. Whether it would be a bit of an overstep from this resolution to be suggesting. Go ahead, Millie.
Yeah, I think I'm in favor of it. I could see some concern or delay from faculty who then have to like change their curriculum, or just, I don't know, like I could maybe see that being an issue, but I'm still in favor of this.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I think the resolution itself wouldn't really get into specifics. It would more be like encouraging, like just a general change in the way assignments are issued in 100 and 200 level classes, because at the end of the day, like curriculum falls to faculty and faculty committees, and it's not really something the Senate really ever gets into. But since we are trying to act in the interest of students, I think it would be beneficial to kind of help faculty.
Any other thoughts on that question?
All right, and next two questions are related, and they are: given the current atmosphere of budget cutting at ASWWU, is an AI detection software the best use of university funds? And should student tuition go towards paying for it?
I think Yasmin had her hand up for a second.
Oh, my bad.
I didn't see that, but I
No,
can.
you're all right. I just wanted to, also be in favor of, although I approve the resolution, but being from the college, I will say like the curriculum is a little difficult to not add some type of writing portion. So I think it could be highly encouraged. I'm not sure if there's going to be any backlash, but I do believe that we should reinforce how it could be, or how if this AI software cannot guarantee then it's going to detect it. So at least as long as we mention that and we encourage them to understand that this could be a risk, and it's also just like a loss of funding that we're placing into something we can't really rely on. I don't know. I'm not sure, but otherwise, great resolution. You can continue.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that feedback, and I feel like that one of our biggest concerns, the AI detection beyond like it coming from student tuition, is that like professors not quite understanding the way AI detection works as opposed to like plagiarism detection. So yeah, I think that's important to keep in mind.
Okay. Yeah. So on the tuition and funding question, I think our in the work group sort of understood that the Senate had a consensus there of like, no, we shouldn't use tuition. But if that's not the case, or if you want to reinforce that point, I'd welcome some thoughts on that.
I mean, I don't think tuition should go towards it, because it's super risky, obviously, and not super researched at this point, and I don't know, for all the reasons that we've said, but especially because it's students' money. I think that, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's see, do we have it? Oh, Yasmin.
Just another following along with that, there could be also, just because this is strictly from the CHSS college, there's no means to put this into tuition, because how are you going to, defer those groups that are going to be using it? Or in case if the whole university wanted it, I mean, realistically, are other departments going to agree to want to do this as a, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of not a good choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like in general the application of the AI detection software would not be universal across campus, and if it wouldn't be appropriate for funding to come from all students for something that would only be used by a handful of departments.
I kind of have a side note about the AI discussion. Do you want me to email you about it? It's just a thought, or should I say it now?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, because I know this isn't like the whole resolution, but like adding in research about why false positives happen, just because I don't think faculty understand like how AI detection works in terms of like it just like looking for average writing and then kind of being like, oh, this could be written by AI. I know that's only some AI detection does it that way, but that might be helpful for the argument.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that maybe rolls into our last couple of questions. If you want to share those, John.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the next two questions. Second one's a little less related, but yeah, I mean, are there any like additional thoughts of things that we would like to be included in the resolution? And that would definitely be one, providing context to studies into false positives of AI, and then how exactly these AI detection softwares work.
Yeah,
Devin agrees. That would be good.
Yasmin, did you have another thing you wanted to say? I'm gonna take that as a no. Okay. Are there people have input on those? Anything else you think we're missing? I know, and now if you want to maybe scroll through the resolving clauses also, just to the next page, to sort of try to show sort of what some of the idea of what we're trying to stick in there.
Yeah, and I guess the next question would be, who should this resolution be targeted towards? We're initially thinking ATC, which is the Faculty Senate Subcommittee or committee that is tasked with writing a recommendation, and then the Faculty Senate, and finally the Provost, who would be making the final decision as to where the funding for this would come from. So like, that would be the intended audience of this resolution. But do any senators have any thoughts as to who this resolution should be directed towards with this language?
Yeah, I think. Oh, Devin, go ahead. I don't have that much.
Well, I would just like kind of follow up. Do you guys think we're missing anyone?
Yeah, I guess I had mentioned in our recruit meeting, maybe the chief information officer, sort of the ATUS branch, a little bit lower than the provost, a little bit separate from the faculty senate. I think this is sort of about who we're like writing to, not necessarily who would like end up reading it, because we tend to distribute all resolutions broadly. Yeah, I don't know.
Would AI detection software consider Grammarly as AI? As Yasmin. Just a thought. That's a good question. I think I would have to look into that, but I think in general, Grammarly has become more advanced. Like it's transitioned from like just a grammar corrector to now like you can use it to rewrite your like, sentences and paragraphs to use a different tone. And I don't quite have the answer to that, whether that would be considered AI, but I feel like that would be important to know, because I know a lot of students, I think a lot of students use Grammarly and they don't consider themselves cheating, and a lot of professors encourage the use of Grammarly. And I think that's completely separate than somebody using ChatGPT to write an essay. I think they're very different tools. And Grammarly is more like supportive as a writing tool, and ChatGPT is more oriented as a creative language model. So, but I don't quite have the answer for that. But I don't know.
Right. I think we're we're a little bit past time here. Are there any like final thoughts or recommendations people have on sort of the broad resolution? I think the work group is hoping to get a final draft out for approval next week, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Daisy, was that a hand?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I was trying to type this, but it won't let me send it. Because it's in reference to the earlier question about what else should be added, and I think a sentence or some language around like emphasizing how detrimental a false positive would be, or even like yes, a false positive would be for like a student's education and reputation would be good for the argument.
I think that would be very important. When we initially formed this group, we were wondering whether or not the resolution should include language for what policy should be put in place if AI detection was implemented. We did decide that that would be more appropriate for a second resolution, depending on whether or not AI was implemented, but definitely emphasizing the potential negative effects of a student, being punished for academic dishonesty would be very important. So appreciate that. Leona says we can include a statement about student testimonials about false positives. That would be, that could be beneficial as well, I think. Okay.
All right. I'm gonna move this on unless there's, one last chance. Any thoughts? No. Okay. Then we'll pass it off to Lola for the next thing in our agenda, which is the amendment to the food security referendum. Yeah.
Fantastic. I guess just checking first, can you all hear me, and how is the audio quality? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Seems pretty good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm currently halfway across the state in the great city of Chelan at a conference. I just found a quick nook to take this meeting. I have two documents to present to you all today. First is a modified version of what you all saw last week, and the other is a statement of support. Between these two documents, the only text which is going to be publicly facing is going to be the meat of the question in bold on the first document, and the text, the body of the statement of support. Before I get in, I just kind of want to go over a quick overview of last week. I landed down in Seattle from the airplane I was on during our previous meeting, and I started to receive some messages that the referendum language passed unanimously, and like super exciting, But at the same time, I sincerely trust all of y'all's I appreciate y'all's trust in me as like a student representative, but I want to make sure that you all also trust in yourselves to have contention here and kind of say no if you don't think it, because this is a contentious matter. The next day after I landed, I woke up to a maelstrom of concerns and questions and red flags being raised, and emergency meetings being addressed all about flaws within this referendum and questions folk were having, which were entirely valid. I've tried to address most of those concerns through the revisions that are in front of you, and I'd love to go through a couple of those key points. But there are also other components which I cannot fully address within these revisions, and I'd love to touch on those more a bit later. But the point of the matter is that this is contentious, and I would sincerely appreciate your deep trust in yourself to make the determination of what feels right to you in terms of voting. With that in mind, just want to check again if y'all can still hear me, because I opened up my notes app. I'm on my phone right now.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Fantastic, thank you. With that in mind, I would love to go over a couple of the biggest changes. The first is that the dollar amount has been changed from $5 to $4.50. While to some this may be an insignificant amount, multiple people raised concerns that $5 might be a little too much, and that since $5 is the area where most students feel like the edge of their comfort level and like wanting to sign on to this, and also the edge of what they can comfortably pay. Folks suggested bringing it down to 450. I think that makes sense. And the other big change that you'll see is that the language is tightened up a lot. Previously, it said that this fund could be used for any sorts of things, food security being the focus, but also, basic needs and a bunch of other things. And I talked with Jen Cook of the Whole Food Pantry, somebody who I missed in my earlier meetings. And they suggested that looseness, that vagueness opens up a lot of legal ramifications and ambiguity and a lot of potential problems and issues. So I went through and tightened it up to say explicitly that this fund will be used for a staff, a full-time temporary position, and food, which seem to be the two biggest needs. And it's very beneficial to have it tightened up. But this opens up two rather important threats and vulnerabilities here. The first is that when we lock ourselves in, it makes it hard to change when the situation changes. And that's definitely something to weigh here and something I'd love to hear thoughts about. But second, it makes it so that if this turns out to be not legally feasible, then since we're locked into it, we can't really be dynamic and fluid to find a wiggle way to make it legally happen. Currently, we're going through the Assistant Attorney General review to see about legality of this referendum, but that won't be ready for a good, decent while. Yeah, I just want to hear thoughts.
Yeah, I think I have to add a little bit of context also. I think from what I understand, and you can correct me, Lola, is that sort of the proposal today is to amend the question that we passed last week to update it so it reads like the one that we have in front of us here, and that the material changes are just the change in the dollar amount and the specification that it's used for food and for a 2-year temporary staff position. Yeah, and it's getting reviewed by the AAG, and I think there's this language, this updated language is what's the thing you see on screen now is what was sent to the Assistant Attorney General's office for review. My personal opinion is I don't understand why there would be any red flags with this. I don't think there were red flags with the one we passed on Monday, but also I'm not the AAG, so Weston doesn't listen to me. Yeah.
Sure. In answering your first question, yes, the ultimate purpose of today is hopefully to have another Senate vote to see if we can vote on updating this language to be or I guess just passing this language. The other one's not going on the ballot. Hoping to get this language passed with the additional recognition of the statement of support, because it adds some context. That's what's going to be publicly facing. Just want to check to see if there are any concerns about what's publicly facing on that. I don't think that's not the kind of thing we need to have a vote on for the statement of support. There's one minor change I'm going to make in it. It's a little hostile right now to the state representatives and to the university. And though hostility is warranted in a lot of respects, probably best not to. It's not great for solidarity building to have that in the referendum. So yeah, that's on your first question. And then on your second question with AAG review, yes, this is the language that is being proposed to the Assistant Attorney General, to my knowledge. And there are a plethora of areas in which this might pose issues. As a public university, there's a wicked amount of laws that are just hidden, and they spring up like trap cards when we're navigating these waters, and can kind of sink the whole thing of potentially these funds can't be used for a representative or a employee, or potentially they can't be used to buy food. And with those in mind, the current strategy is, if the ag review says that this is illegal, we don't put it on the ballot. If it says that it is legal, we put it on the ballot. If we don't hear back from them, we hold off. We hold off until next year, because it's best to play this safe. The risk is we get this and the students pass it, and then it doesn't actually happen. And that is not great for student support. That's not great for student belief in AS as an institution and false hope and all that. But yeah.
Thank you for saying that, Lola. I just wanted to chime in really quick. Yes, I think that the question for the AAG is specifically around whether students' voluntary fees can go to pay a professional staff salary. Just to your question, Gabe, about like, why is this being raised? What is the red flag? I think that's like the main red flag. Yes, and then Lola, thank you so much for bringing up that point about like the different scenarios around what could happen depending on the Attorney General's response. I'd really like for y'all to just kind of consider like critically what it could mean for, like the way students view the institution if this was passed on the ballot now and then the Attorney General came back later and said that it can't happen. That could potentially create like a lot of it could create a lot of hurt feelings. Students could be very upset about that. So just think really critically about whether or not that's something that you want to risk. And I would welcome discussion around that as well. There's also a question in the chat from Mel Lee that should also be addressed, but we're kind of on two different points.
Yeah, I'll put
Yeah.
Lee's question first. Just read that out. What is the reasoning behind a full-time staff member as opposed to a part-time or student member?
Yes. I think that's a really good question because it's really important to have some student positions and student employees. And that's something some of the food pantry folk were suggesting as a possibility, an alternative to a full-time staff position. Ultimately, there are two primary reasons that were brought up, primarily by Jen Cook, but others as well. The first is that having a full-time staff position is a guarantee. It is a guarantee that this will be staffed, that it will be fully hours committed to it, and that it will have the attention that it needs. That sometimes doesn't happen with student positions. We can see that with our own work, we're not clocking all the hours, which is a good thing and a bad thing. And it's good to have somebody who's really dedicated to this long term, especially over 2 years and over the summer as well. But the other reason is that this position will be largely in charge of coordinating and outreach, coordinating volunteers and lifting the load off of the existing student employees and helping coordinate these student employees and doing kind of external long-term grant research. And Jen and others suggested that this position would be much more comfortable and much more viable with a professional staff as opposed to student employees. And I think that was valid. So that's how I changed it. But if there were contesting views, I would love to hear them.
Yeah, I guess a question I have, and this may be pedantic and not useful. When you say Leona, when you said professional staff, did you mean professional staff as in exempt from the civil service, or do you mean like professional just meaning full-time colloquially?
Well, like the specifications haven't, sorry, Lola, if you want to answer that.
Yeah. Colloquially, because I don't really know much about the laws in terms of like which types of staff are what, and that is another like area of like ag review kind of situation. All I know is they were suggesting full-time staff, and I think, I don't know. And if Leone has other ideas.
No, yeah, just to piggyback off what you're saying, Lola, like, I mean, there's different categories of professional staff, like, exempt, non-exempt, like there's all these different categories. There's also classified staff. I think the point here is that it would be a full-time person. It's not a temporary job, and that they would not be a student. But yeah, I think that's what matters in this context.
Yeah, go ahead,
Melly.
I think, I mean, it makes sense given the reasons that you gave to have a full-time staff member. I guess my concern would just be how much of the total like amount is going to the like employment and then to the food. But also I don't know how much it costs, I guess, to keep food pantries fully stocked. Um
Um,
yeah, sorry, this isn't
yeah,
like a fully formed question or thought.
no, I actually love that question. It opens up two different conversation topics. The first is kind of like how much of this would be going to a full-time staff person. This fund would looks like it would collect about $150,000 per year, even with reducing it to $4.50, which is substantial. And a position like this, obviously the specifics would need to be ironed out. Just like loose off the cuff, estimating like $50,000 per year for this kind of position, and benefits and stuff, it might be more, might be less. That's still around the ballpark of $100,000 for the pantries. Um, Currently, the non-whole pantries are running on less than $5,000 a quarter each, substantially for most of them. And this would be a significant increase in terms of food stock, with that $100,000. And then the other avenue is kind of the purpose of this position. Something Jen Cook identified is that this fund would substantially increase the burden put on her as a administrative personnel and her staff members as well. And that though that burden would be very welcomed, it could only be feasible if there was an additional person brought on to, for a significant part of their job at least, manage this fund and manage collecting and purchasing and distribution. So it kind of is, for better or worse, a little bit baked into it as a necessity of implementation.
Melly, was that a follow-up or is that from before?
I mean, I had like another question that was separate, but also Daisy, please go.
Okay, I mean, no worries, but I can propose my question. So I guess my initial thought, like when it said full-time employee, that just made me think like would the administration of this fund really take up 40 hours a week? Um, and that's just, I mean, I don't know. But then you've said something about collecting and distributing. Does that mean that they would also be like, would they have more involvement than just with the funds? Because if so,
I
then I'm like, definitely that would make sense for them to need all those hours.
I love that question, and yes, because ultimately the food pantries don't do anything for long-term food security. They make material conditions better, but they're a band-aid fix. They are a patch. And what ultimately needs to happen on campus and around the globe is a transition away from a reliance on food security, to have food security more baked into our day-to-day lives, to have it systemic changes, long-term changes. And that would be, if not the like biggest thing other than food distribution, that would be like the primary role of this job. Somebody who's investigating these long-term strategies, and as a part of, they're also helping the food pantries now with this 2-year fund. But the goal is to transition away from a reliance on food pantries, and this is a way to keep that bandage in place for the next 2 years while we try and heal the wound as best as possible through this position. Any follow-up thoughts and questions, Stacey? Otherwise, I know Melly had another point.
No, yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. You're so knowledgeable about this. And so yeah, this is awesome.
Just to clarify really quick, Lola, could you talk a little bit about the actual timeline for implementation of the funds and everything?
Yes. That's an area I'm not entirely knowledgeable about. I know when I was going into this, my interpretation was that like this is the kind of thing that starts up in fall quarter. But I've also heard things that like the university needs to review some of these things, and there are a bunch of other checks and passes to the point where and implementation of like administering this fee and collecting it through like all that. I don't know, all that. It's a whole mess, you know. I'm just a student, but it seems like probably the year after next. So 25, 26. It's not entirely clear. That's another area of ambiguity, which I hope to iron out soon. But with that in mind, as it's a 2-year position, we added a like a re-evaluation period because like students need to vote on it regularly every so years. I think for SCJF it's like 5 or something. This one is going to be 2, with the first election happening the year after hiring. That basically ensures that we'll have 2 years of a person in this position, which is also kind of the minimum for them to like not only really sink their teeth into it, but also to hopefully enact some change.
Yes, after having reviewed previous referendums, it looks like things don't really get put into motion until about 4 years after being voted on. So I think that thinking about the timeline that way might be helpful. But like you said, Lola, I'm with you. It is a bit ambiguous, and I'm throwing that number out there because that is what has happened previously with previous referendums. But I think ultimately implementation and speed of that is going to depend on like prior planning and like how ironed out and dialed the plan is for this project. From like, I don't know, like an administrative standpoint, it doesn't feel like we're really there. Like there's a lot of sort of objective questions that need to be answered, like the ones that Melly has raised so far around like, okay, like how much money is there? How is that going to be allocated? What is the salary? What are the hours? And then also like how much money needs to go to the pantries for what, where, all of that. And I understand that like, you know, it's like not there yet, and that's okay, but I'm just saying that that could add time. So if the timeline
Definitely.
and is a factor at all for senators, that's just something that I wanted to kind of like, I don't know, touch on a little bit, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Leona, I want to ask a follow-up to that. When you say 4 years to get off the ground, do you mean 4 years before the voluntary fee is assessed? Is that what you're saying?
Like 4 years until the fees are being used the way that they're supposed to be used, like collected and implemented and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
On sort of a time note, I think I don't know, Lila, do you want to sort of lay out some options for moving forward? And then I think Melly had another point also, if you want to get there.
Yeah. First off, I want to say that having an increased timeline is something that y'all should think about if you're deciding to put this to a vote, in terms of, you know, like better attention, and also of like, this is the kind of thing that we want to do in 4 years, or if we should like try and bank on something else, you know. Other than that, in terms of timelines, this is the kind of stuff that will be tinkered out. I'm going to tinker with it and iron it out as much as I can before I graduate and get a good legacy document, or I think there's a different name now, and I'm sure Gabe is going to talk about that more after this. But yeah, that all is happening after the election, assuming this gets there, you know. Yeah. Other than that, we hope the ag comes back with some good information. And if they don't get back to us, then we just have another year to really iron things out.
Melly, did you have, I don't remember if we got to your follow-up or not.
Yeah, I have 2 more questions. Sorry, I'm being annoying about this. The first one, I guess, was like, I believe you'd considered maybe expanding beyond food and having other like basic needs like menstrual products and stuff like that. What was kind of the reasoning to stick with food? And then are you, and maybe this is a question that can be answered only after this has been implemented, but like, is reserves something that is being considered? So like, if we're looking at a continual cycle of 2 years, is there being like, is there money that's going to be put aside to kind of, I guess, to explain like if it does not go through after those 2 years, to kind of transition out of that period and transition smoothly?
Okay, I love both of those questions. On the first question, in terms of expanding beyond food, that is the primary reason why I was using the language of basic needs. But Jen and others came back and said that current stuff that has like is earmarked for like food security and like to be in the pantries is, you know, food they're able to include as like toiletries, menstrual cycle, menstrual products. And that is like, it seems like a vagueness to me, but it seems like how they're operating, and they suggested we just have the word be food, but they can use that funds for otherwise. And I think that's an important clarification. They suggested we not use the terms basic need security because those are inclusive of things like housing and safety and all these other things, which is not the responsibility of the food pantries and would be difficult to, I don't know, have them wrapped up into in a capacity beyond what they are actively trying to participate in. So that's why that language changed, and a little bit for clarity. But yes, these funds would still be used for other purposes like that. And in terms of your second question, that's a really good idea. Um, yeah, I think that's the kind of like implementation stage type stuff, but I'm writing that down because that is a good idea.
Devin, I saw your hand up for a second. I don't know. I'm assuming you don't want to say anything since you brought it down. If not, raise it again. We do have 5 minutes left in our meeting since we did shorten them. I think I sort of want to lay out. Okay, Devin, you does have something, but after I'll finish and then Devin, you can talk. The sort of, because we have already referred the question we proposed last week to the student body. I think if we want to not move forward with any referendum at all, I think we should probably, in sort of the most proper way, like repeal that motion or just sort of withdraw that referral. And if we want to approve this language, we should amend that referral from last week to this language. I think those are kind of the two main options. I don't know, Lil, if you have other thoughts there, but I'll pass it off to Devin. Oh, sorry, Lila, go ahead if you want to go.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Just have this be a vote to see if we can amend it and see what people think about this amendment process. And then we can always like back out later on. 'Cause, like if the ag review doesn't come back, we're gonna like not put it on the ballot. There's processes to back out beyond 3 Senate. So yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
Devin, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just want to address the timeline issues and like all the extra implementation stuff. I think, you know, the real question that we need to kind of ask ourselves is, are we even qualified to figure that out? Because, right? I mean, sometimes the best people to figure out the sort of implementation issues are the people who are tasked with implementing it, right? Because, you know, I'm not a professional when it comes to navigating the universe's laws and, you know, all of that, and how we can actually feasibly manage the money to like have this sort of backup plan with reserves if it, you know, gets struck down in 2 years. You know, those are all great questions, but I think we also have to think like, are we qualified to do it? And even if we figured it out, would it meaningfully shorten the time? Because there's still time to go out and like find the people to do this stuff. There's time spent on like admin review, right? Like the people, the higher ups, they still would need to go through and review all of these things that we figure out to actually see if we made, you know, sound decisions that, you know, might not have made because we don't have the professional judgment for it. So I just think that when you guys are considering your vote, you just keep that in mind and really just think about the purpose and the main motivation behind this. Like, do you agree with this? Do you think we should ask the students this question of implementing this fee? And trying to help alleviate this issue.
With that in mind, I'd love to motion to vote on amending the language to put this modified version through to the student body.
All right, is there a second on the motion to amend the referendum language to be this, what you've seen before you?
No seconds.
Okay, it's been moved by Thompson, seconded by Moreno. Is there any discussion? I know I have one thing I want to propose, and that's that in this amended version, instead of saying that the students are approving a quarterly fee, that we use the language that the active transportation fee used and like be assessed a quarterly fee, because like we're asking them, should the students approve this, but they are the students, so I think they should be voting on something that's more material than like, do you agree that this is your opinion?
Love it. Just made the edit.
Great. Okay, but we'll consider that a friendly amendment. If Devin, do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, cool. Any other discussion on the motion to amend the proposal that we or the referendum that we approved last week so that it's this referendum language? Okay, I don't see any discussion, so we'll move it to a vote then. All those in favor of amending the food security referendum question so that it reads as presented in this document here, just say aye in the chat, or yay, whatever. If you're opposed, say nay. If you want to abstain, just type abstain in the chat, and we'll let those ones flow in. And then the other thing is we do have, I would like to get sort of reports going, but I also don't want to extend the meeting if you guys don't want to. So once I called a tally on this vote, if someone wants to motion to extend our meeting by like 10 minutes, I would welcome that. And if that motion dies, then we'll adjourn at our regular time. Okay, it does look like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 yays. So yeah, that passes unanimously. So that'll be amended and that'll be reflected in the documents that Lola submits to Adam to file for the election. All right, next things on our agenda. I guess, yeah, I want to open the floor since we are at time. Does anyone want to move to extend our meeting by 10 minutes?
I will move to extend. That being said, I will be stepping out. So I move to extend the meeting for the rest of y'all.
Okay. Moved by Thompson. Is there a second? Is there a second on extending the meeting? I take that as there is not a second, and the motion dies. So I will adjourn this meeting of the Student Senate at 6:03 p.m. and we'll be moving our reports to next week. But I think I will let Nellie go though, because I think Nellie has stuff that's important to discuss if you want to share.
I can just share it at the next meeting. It's not
that important.
No.
Okay, cool. Goodbye, everyone. It's adjourned.